Right, we're live and recording for a very, very exciting conversation with a very, very a big leader all the way from Washington, D.C. today. Renard, it's a pleasure having you today for our podcast. Welcome.
Tool, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. And just to sort of give a quick perspective of Renard's very rich career history within the entertainment sector. Renard currently works, as the president and CEO of I2A2 Technology Labs and Studios. That's a startup in animation plus things. And we'll very eager to know some of the aspects that you're looking at actually in your startup. Um, uh, he also currently serves as the president of SMPTE, which is the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. He also serves on the board of Hollywood Professional Association and on the advisory board of Exceptional Minds. Renard, we met when you were at Warner Brothers, but
Yeah.
again, in your career history, you've been with some really big brands, including PBS, Discovery, CNN, and Turner. And then also a host of awards, including a couple of Emmys, and I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's an absolute wonderful pleasure to have you and also discuss with you, all the things that are happening within the sector. Some great, some something that will require leaders like you to sort of take a pause and opine on how where the industry goes from here, but very eager to have this conversation.
Sure, sure. I am too. I am too. Like we were talking in the pre-meeting. It's been a few years since we met, and I've been following what Vitrina has been doing, and it's become critical for our industry. So congratulations to you and the team.
Thank you. And you've been very encouraging with all the initiatives that we've taken with Vitrina. Super appreciative of all our efforts. Our community is now 65,000 exec strong. So your voice, is being carried across to our entire community across 100 countries, where we have a lot of fan following, users, and readers of everything that we put up.
Wow.
Thank you.
Now I'm nervous.
No, but Renard, I mean, I wanted to actually straight away start off on this latest initiative. So it was a while after, a long career at Waters that you left, and now this is a startup. Tell us more. Excited to know what you're up to.
Well, yeah. I2A, it truly is a technology company. It's a lab. We do research and development, and we are a studio, so we do content creation. The goal of what we focus on, we're a software development company, first and foremost. But we also realize that a lot of our tools that we're building have byproducts. And those byproducts can work across verticals. So it's not just media and entertainment. We're also looking at marketing and research. We are also looking at where we can play in healthcare and education. And our tagline is that we really do try and make the best ethically responsible tools that we possibly can to solve the problems of our customers. And our customers, like I said, it goes across those four verticals I mentioned earlier. The problems that individuals bring to us are always unique, and that gives us the opportunity to come up with some really custom solutions that allow us to use both traditional tools that are in front of us today and traditional style of software development, as well as integrating in some of the artificial intelligence that can help us to streamline the process and the tools, and even in some cases make the tools easier for the individuals to use. So another thing that we say, especially when we're working with the media and entertainment segment, is that our goal is to make technology easy for the artists and cost effective for their business. Because when it all comes down to it, it's all a business. And so we want to be on the right side of the conversation when it comes to building and utilizing all of this wonderful technology that's in front of us.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
that and again, all of these are exciting areas that require video, storytelling, content to
Hmm.
really carry forward. And a lot of these are trying to solve global problems across multiple markets in multiple countries in
Yep.
multiple languages, as we've seen. You've always gravitated towards the technology side of the equation. So I'm curious. From your current venture perspective, what part of the supply chain attracts you most from a problem solving perspective, right? When you looked at the whole supply chain saying, oh, like this requires an intervention and there are gaps here that need to be filled up, what excites you most as an entrepreneur?
Whew. That's a big question and a tool, to be honest, because I started doing supply chain style design and everything back in 2003, really looking at where this industry could go and where there were tons and tons of gaps, and we fill some of those. However, I do believe that starting at the very beginning of the process, even going as far up as development, there are opportunities within the development area for us to streamline how that is actually working. And then looking at how that thread carries through all the way out through the multiple formats and the multiple platforms that are at our disposal right now for distribution. So when you think about gaps, I would say I'm most excited about closing the gaps, not necessarily one in particular,
Okay.
but I do see that there is an area of need with the amount of data that we leave on the floor. The proverbial cutting room floor. There is a lot of data that we drop along the way. Starting, like I said, in development, but definitely a lot of data is being gathered during the production aspect of the process that doesn't really make it into post production. However, if we were to optimize that data and then utilize it as a part of the process, we could actually streamline the work that actually goes into creating a lot of the stories that we love to watch and consume. I think it's really important that we look at that portion of the business. And then I also think that it's really important that we look at sort of what I like to call, others have used this phrase as well, the digital backlot, which is where you have all of these various assets. And then how do you actually make them cross all of the various verticals and departments that are a part of the production process? Where do we actually look at the value, and then we look at where it can actually be of value?
Hmm.
Those are two different things. The value of an asset and where it can actually be of value is one of those areas that we really study a lot when we engage with clients. And that's important because then it gets you back into sort of the standards conversations, and it gets you back into the format conversations. And then it gets you through, back really and truly into the architecture conversation of what some of these pipelines really look like
Hmm.
today and what they could look like in the future. I think that's what's exciting to me when I start thinking about the pipeline, because there are lots of gaps and to be honest, no matter how efficient we get something or we build something or we design something, there's always going to be a way to make it more efficient. The question is whether or not efficiency is actually going to bring you value, and that's a question you have to ask.
Fascinating. And we met in February again at Palm Springs for the HPA retreat. I was talking to Seth, who's the president of HPA and our very dear friend. And just blown away by some of the things that we saw, in terms of new tech, AI. It
Hmm.
was absolutely shocking in a few instances of seeing where AI could be applied, both in terms of, very exactly what you mentioned, right, in the development process. And then once, the whole toolkit and the suite of tools attacks production and some of the post production work, and now of course localization as well. We're
Yes.
seeing a lot of companies emerge. One of the most number of companies that we've listed, right, in the last maybe 8 months are, companies in localization,
Yeah.
animation, and post production.
Hmm.
are the areas that there are lots of new software companies, and lots of new tools coming up
Mhm.
within the scheme of things. Was there something in particular that really has caught your fancy in the last few days that met in HPA?
Well, yeah. Look, a lot has changed since the HPA Tech Retreat, and that was a really exciting a few days where we had the opportunity to see what was current then and where they actually stood. I think when I look at the industry and the research that I'm doing, it does fall in line with what you've described. Localization has definitely taken off because individuals are seeing that there is the capability to streamline a very taxing and intensive portion of the process. There's also a way for us to enhance the capabilities of primary actors and actresses with regard to how they are represented around the world. But there's also a lot of fear with what's going on in that particular space. Is that going to replace the human element and the human touch of what what has been typically sort of work for folks within specific regions of the world? And the example I think that is best is if we think about the fact that a person like Tom Cruise, or Tom Hanks or Denzel Washington, there is a person, there is a male voice in various regions around the country, around the world, that people they are used to hearing
Yes.
as that particular actor. And if we go into all of a sudden changing that, what effect will we have on the audience?
Right.
How effective would that actually be?
Hmm.
Or do we look at localization and say, hey, well, localization is just not about changing the voice. It's also about looking at the inflection. It's also about looking at the cultural impact of what's being said and how it's being said. Can artificial intelligence do that? Is it in our best interest to use it at this time? Or do we look at the fact that we need to maybe train the models
Hmm.
on the regional voices and the regional individuals who have been doing this work for many, many years? There's lots of questions that have to happen in that way. So localization is interesting, but if you enter it thinking that it's just about changing the voice,
Hmm.
you know, you've already lost the battle.
That's right. That's right. And I think this is a great segue to the whole debate about standards. You mentioned standards earlier. Standards is also a big factor for SMPTE. With that you lead. Talk a little bit about what the challenges are the for associations like SMPTE and HPA as
Yeah.
we are sort of navigating through some of this big technological change.
I'll start with HPA, and when I look at HPA, our president Seth Hallen always says HPA is a friend to all. They are there to be sort of the glue that helps to pull all of these things together. And when you think about a supply chain based organization, they're very much in the center of the post production world. They have their finger on the pulse of everything that is happening in that space, but they also reach out to all aspects of production. And I think it's needed that we have sort of a place where people can come together and talk about the operational side and essentially the applied technology that it takes in order for us to build out these production pipelines and actually make them work. On the SMPTE side, standards are extremely important, and a lot of people seem to want to push that aside right now, and that is concerning
Hmm.
because without standards, you start to lose interoperability across products and across services and across applications, which then will cause a break in the supply chain. That's why standards are extremely important. That doesn't mean that open source, applications and open source, these platforms that are out here are in any way wrong or bad or anything like that. They are not. They actually are what I like to look at, and what I think about open source is that it is the spark for innovation.
Yes.
It actually creates a space for you to innovate and for you to try and to move things around in a much more agile form.
Mm.
Standards then need to come in once you figure out which direction is going to be best to bring the industry back together and say, hey, here's a place where all of us can play and all of us can benefit from this particular technology. And if we standardize about how we're going to actually implement this,
Mm.
we now give the industry a place that they can hold on to and say, hey, if I pick up application X or tool or hardware or whatever it is, Y, I know that it is going to work with Z because they are all standardized around that. That helps from an architectural standpoint. It also helps from sort of a design aspect when you are looking at how you are building out your pipeline. Because if you've got a bunch of open source tools, it's great, but you have to sort of include a bridge from one to the other if they do not necessarily talk well to one another. That's where standards comes in. It's that glue. It's that way that we can actually create a space where everybody can actually succeed. And I believe that standard, the traditional standards organizations working very closely with the open source tools that are out there, that's our future. That's where the industry needs to be focused. It is not either or. It is definitely and at this point.
Fascinating. I mean, there are so many amazing ideas and interesting ideas that you talked about, and I wanted to actually sort of just go back to a couple of those. Actually,
Sure.
Renard, if I can. So it kind of feels like the Band-Aid got ripped off, in the last 5 years, especially with streaming
Hmm.
touching the world, right? Earlier, even if you had standards, those standards were localized in broadcast and film industries of specific countries, and it
Hmm.
was all localized, and
Hmm.
it was very domestic,
Hmm.
right? And Brazil could have its own for its own broadcasters, and India could have its own, and the US could have its own.
Hmm.
Um, but now with streaming, you suddenly feel like, almost 60, 70, 80 countries now are playing. And I don't know if there's been a big challenge felt or with the shock of that by organizations like SMPTE, where standards is a thing, but now you have to balance it out with a lot of these new countries that are also where the play is.
Yeah, I would look at it like this. SMPTE is a global organization. So our members are literally around the world. We have members everywhere. And our goal in the way that we look at it is that we invite everybody to the table, especially within our standards community, to
Okay.
have those types of conversations. Let's talk about why are certain things the way that they are within the regions of the world. And is there a way for us to help in that space? Is there a way for us to say, hey, let's work on finding a common ground between regions. And you start small and you build from there. But yes, streaming, as you have stated, is streaming is a very interesting animal because it was they called it the streaming wars for a reason because everybody wanted to come out with something that was uniquely theirs. And so you had all of these various ways to actually deal with how are you going to stream and what's going to be the most efficient and the most effective way to keep people looking at these screens and give them the greatest experience that they could expect. When you had all of that going on, then you had organizations like Dash, that were saying, hey, wait a minute, there's a different way that we could approach this. Maybe if we standardize, we could help with this. And there were other organizations as well. I just mentioned Dash because that was one of the most, like the one that was in the press the most.
Right.
And so you then had that. So it was sort of like the world was realizing that they needed standards in the middle of a war. And when you look at the success rate of a lot of the streamers, from a financial standpoint, it's interesting. I think is the best way to put it.
Hmm.
From a reach standpoint, it is incredibly amazing at how streamers have audiences of the size that they have. And they are able to serve that many individual devices, sometimes three or four in one location, looking at various things on that same platform
Hmm.
within close proximity of each other. That in itself is an amazing feat. But even within that, there are still standards, and there's still a need for standards. So I find streaming truly fascinating to really research and to look into. I do believe that when we look at what has happened with some of the larger streamers, they are realizing that they may have missed a few opportunities along the way in the effort to get eyeballs,
Hmm.
as opposed to in the effort to really and truly build a platform that's going to be sustainable and that is something that people are going to want to engage with long term. So, you hear a lot of them complain about churn. Well, churn can be good and bad, but when you see the amount of churn that's happening with some of the larger ones where people are simply saying, no, I'm going to turn this off and I'll pick it up the next time there's a 7-day trial period offered to me. A lot of that has to do with individuals, the fickleness of the viewer
Right.
and their desire to, only engage with something that they truly want to be engaged with, and also the desire for what a lot of us wanted during the cable wars, which was a la carte. I want to be able to choose what I want to be able to choose.
Yes.
And if the platform is clunky or it doesn't allow me to, sort of flow easily in and out, then I'm not going to pay for it. I'm going to turn it off and I'll figure out another way to view whatever content that I want to view. And you're seeing that become a lot easier as a lot of these companies are now starting to share content across the various streamers, and making deals with one another on how we can play together. I have a feeling that eventually it's going to pull us right back into the old cable model,
That's right. That's right.
because a lot of the people who are making these decisions, they came from that world and they're most comfortable with that. The idea that individuals were able to pick and choose and to, turn on and turn off, that is really uncomfortable for people who are used to actually saying, okay, I've got this many subscribers and I know that at the end of the month I'm going to make this amount of money. And I know that I'll carry that into next year because I've got them locked into a 2-year contract.
Right.
That doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Nobody's going to sign a 2-year contract. People are going to say, look, if it's not subscriber based, I'm not really interested.
Right.
The audience has changed and their desire has changed.
I mean, these are the kind of standards that require, uh, you know, organizations like the SMPTE
Mm-hmm.
to come in and then, sort of, get all the players and key participants involved to have
Mm-hmm.
that dialogue. Um, and I mean, some of the ideas that you hit upon there, lots of standards currently missing in the streaming sort of world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the packaging, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
the way the subscriptions work, even
Yep.
advertising, I would argue,
Mm-hmm.
there is a bus miss there,
Yes.
where the advertising, workflows and inventory management is not completely standardized. Um,
Yeah.
then we've had, in the midst of all that, we've had all kinds of pressures on fast and
Mm-hmm.
more pressures on localizations
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. Which are your most active committees or standards committees, that are really trying to very quickly eject out a solution Would you characterize any committees that are super active right now?
I would have to say that really all of the standards organizations are really focused on this.
Okay.
I can't pinpoint
And
one
how many
of
such
yeah.
organizations do you?
Oh my gosh, there are like a lot there. You know, I don't even know the actual number, but there are a lot around the world.
Okay.
And like we spoke of earlier, a lot of them are regionalized. You know, but SMPTE is sort of the you know, I don't like to say the grandfather because it makes it sound very old, or the grandmother. But it is the 107-year-old organization, and um, it truly does look across the industry at what the needs are and how can we be a part of helping to lead the industry into all of those things. So I wouldn't want to say that one or the other
Hmm.
is, you know, sort of like, you know, more focused than any of the others, because we're all focused on it. When I meet with other presidents of the other organizations, when we have conversations, we are intently you know, taking a look at where this industry is going and how do we actually
Hmm.
work towards what's good for this industry with the standards and with the technology. How do we actively work towards what's good for our members and this industry? And when you look at the organizations that I have the opportunity to meet with, we cover the entire industry,
Hmm.
you know, from every aspect.
Right. You know, I wanted to actually then understand. You referenced some of the challenges in streaming from a standards perspective, from a
Hmm.
global expansion perspective, from a
Yep.
technological perspective. Um, from for the rest of the supply chain, where are how would you characterize some of the digital transformation related challenges?
Yeah, the
Especially, I
digital
mean,
transformation. Yeah.
so just to
Hmm.
extend one aspect, right? I mean, whether we like it or not, Moore's law has been introduced
Yes.
inside the supply chain. You know, with
Hmm.
gaming engines. I mean, just it's not just Gen AI, right? It's
Yes.
cloud computing. It's
Hmm.
you know, gaming engines that now are affecting post production, special effects,
Hmm.
animation.
Yep.
I was curious to sort of see, you know, digital transformation and, you know, where are the biggest challenges for the industry.
Well, first of all, I have to say that I am definitely pro the digital transformation. I am all on board with that because what it does is it creates more space to create, and it also opens the door for a more inclusive way that we approach this process. There are individuals who typically would have sort of stood back because they didn't necessarily understand the underpinnings of what it took to actually put all this stuff together, who can now join the party because they come from a computer science background
That's right.
and they have a big play into what's actually happening. I think one of the bigger gaps that we have, because you have to go back again, this is, as you stated, the digital transformation, which means that there's a ton of stuff that is not digital right now that needs to be a part of this process. That onboarding aspect of this needs to happen. That's where tools like, you know, some of the tools that I built in my past, like the digital backlot and things of that nature, that's where they come in because they not only help you to sort of bridge between analog and digital and then preparing the digital assets for use within the new pipeline and new production pipeline, but they also give you the opportunity to really take a look at the value of what you're bringing in and decide whether or not you really need it. I think that's one of the areas that's just ripe for exploration. I also think that really understanding the value of metadata and that is a huge part of the digital transformation. And you heard that years and, you know, a few years ago, everyone was saying metadata, metadata, metadata. It was in everybody's presentation. Everyone was holding on to it. And then we got into talking about microservices and how do those microservices actually work.
Hmm.
I don't think that we have ever gotten to the conversation of, okay, it's great. We've got metadata, we've got microservices, but what's going to control all of this? and what's going to actually help us to utilize these essentially components in an organized manner. And that gets us back to standards. You know, um, I see that as an area of exploration for the digital transformation. The other part about it that I really do enjoy is the amount of feedback and the amount of data that you can actually pull back from your viewers, and who's viewing what, how are they engaging with the content, what's actually there. Um, that opens the door for more exploration as to how do you truly advance storytelling. And that gets into some of the other stuff that my team and I do on the neuroscience side, because we use biometrics and neuroscience to help on our marketing and research side for content engagement.
Wow.
And by taking a look at what's going on in that particular space, we can help companies really understand how people are engaging with their content and how people are truly interested. Because if you take the old focus group, the standard focus group, you get people in a room. Part of the problem is that if they're filling out a survey or if they're using button-based, responses, whether or not they know it, they are influenced by the others in the room.
Right.
It's just human nature.
That's right.
But when you can say, okay, I'm going to have this individual take a look at this, and they're going to look, they're going to, we're going to wire them up, or we're going to pay attention to where their eye gaze and their tracking and all of these types of things are happening. What you can do is you can take that survey and you can juxtaposition that against what you're actually pulling out from their actual biometrics, and you can see where they may say one thing, but they're actually viewing something different, and they are interacting in a manner that is contrary, or it could be in compliance with, but it could be either or with regard to how they're filling out the actual information. That's one of the products that I2A2 has already. We already have that ready to go, and if people are interested in doing that kind of work, please reach out to us. Um, we would love to help you understand that. It's that kind of thought that I think has to be a part of the digital transformation,
Right.
and it's closing those kinds of gaps that will help us to understand how we can truly, wield this very, very powerful tool that we have, which is the media industry. In truth, we have to be responsible in the way that we use this tool, because we essentially control how others see the world if they don't have the opportunity to travel and explore. You have a lot of power with the images and the sound that you are presenting to this world, and you got to be responsible with it. That's a huge thing for me, because I just believe that in the past, the way that some of the imagery has portrayed certain groups is just, to be honest, it's just wrong, and that needs to be, changed,
Right.
in my opinion.
Fascinating. Now, the engagement part actually resonates, especially given everything that we're seeing with sports, everything that we're seeing with even Netflix's announcements recently about the whole experiential marketing with the new Netflix House announcement that just came in a couple of days ago. It was pretty fascinating. It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Restaurants, and then of course, the whole sort of shopping experience
Hmm.
to that extent. And then last year they had a ton of announcements relating to gaming as well,
Yeah.
where some of their key shows are extended into gaming, um,
Yes.
and mobile gaming or console gaming.
Hmm.
So when you talked about engagement and measuring engagement, I think it will resonate with a lot of folks. One of the biggest constituencies that we've seen actually, Renard, as we mapped the supply chain, is there are a host of very, very exciting storytellers who are in the very, very early stages of content development, content conceptualization.
Hmm.
bringing very fresh new IP.
Yes.
They don't just want that IP to extend into movies or television series, right? They want it to be extended to as many touch points
Yes.
for the consumer.
Yes.
So, does that kind of resonate with the work that you're doing in your new venture from an engagement perspective?
Yes. Oh, very much so. Very much so. That is what that is the phrase that was coined. I think it was from he was either from UCLA or USC. I can't remember his professor, and he coined the phrase of transmedia. And the way that you look across all of these actual opportunities and verticals is through a transmedia lens. So when you are developing something, you're not just developing it to be, sort of the filmmaker and the auteur of the past.
Hmm.
You are developing it because you want it to be something that can be a game. It can be a short on social media. It can be a feature film. It could be a traditional television series. Um, it could be, the marketing aspects of it could go through the roof if you're looking across all of these things, and that's really wonderful. And I fully support that. And yes, my company does help with teaching companies how to think that way, but also here are the tools that we can put in your hands that will help you actually be able to do that. Because right now, if you look at a traditional, and we'll just use a traditional studio, for example, a traditional studio, even when they are working together, there are silos within those studios. And, the visual effects person is not necessarily aware of what the sound department is doing.
That's
The
right.
stage folks are not necessarily aware of what the visual effects person needs to do until probably a few days before, when they say, hey, we need to use the stage for X, Y, and Z. Can we start building this out? All of those types of things, this of course, it's traditional communications issue that comes when you have silos, because we all know that. But they don't necessarily share assets. All of those different silos don't necessarily share assets, and it's interesting because throughout the development process, they are joining hands at certain times, but it's more of a hand off
Handoff. Yes.
instead of a handshake. And you need to start figuring out how you can sort of get those silos to do more handshaking and also more communication upstream, so that everybody understands, how all of this is really going to work together. That's the traditional model that, to be honest, is still in play in some places.
Hmm.
If it's not in play at your studio and you're watching this, good for you. That's a good place to be. And I'm not throwing any shade on any of the studios. I'm just talking about the 100-year-old processes that we have in place. And they are in place because, to be honest, those 100-year-old processes have worked very well for 100 years. So now what you're trying to do is make them more efficient. And that's where, companies like mine and others are trying to get in there and trying to figure this out. But it means that we have to work with everyone, across that production pipeline. You cannot work with one group and solve for their problem only, because all you're doing is you're just compounding the issue. So when I, to your question of where, it's everywhere. Like we started this conversation all the way back to development.
That's right.
There's massive advancements that are happening that help, content creators develop their thoughts faster. And we should look at these things as actual tools that can be used to foster
Hmm.
creativity and to enhance creativity and to sort of bolster
Hmm.
the individuals who are using them. That process is already in place. You talked about gaming. You talked about animation. Those areas are being affected very, very quickly
Right.
through generative AI. However, let's look at some of the operational things that happen within the production pipeline, and what needs to happen. When you talk about the supply line and you talk about the production pipeline, you have to make sure that you understand predictive AI, because predictive AI actually becomes far more important, in my opinion,
Hmm.
than generative AI when you're looking at this from a supply chain or a pipeline standpoint. And the reason is I need to be able to predict what the next step is in that production pipeline. And generative AI, while it may be able to generate something for me, it may not know where that needs to go.
Fascinating.
That's where predictive AI is really the driver. And that then takes us all the way back to what a lot of us were doing, 10, 12, maybe even 15 years ago, which was machine learning. And machine learning has not gone anywhere. It's still a big part of everything that we actually do every single day. However, it's not the shiniest penny in the bank right now. We see all of these things, generative AI is just all over the place. Everybody's all excited about it. And that's good, and that's fun. And to be honest, you can go down a rabbit hole with any of those tools, either generating images, generating sound, generating writing, whatever it is. You can go down a rabbit hole very easily. And that's the key. What OpenAI did was they didn't invent anything brand new. They just made it really easy for people to engage with it. And so now it becomes the thing that everyone is doing. Predictive AI takes a little bit more time, and it takes a little bit more of your computer science knowledge to truly get involved with that. But it's been around for a long time. I made the joke recently that if you thought that your financial advisor was like this genius and your financial advisor was just, they were just giving you all of this information. It was just no, they were not a genius. They were using predictive AI even back then to kind of figure out, okay, where is the market going to go? Once again, it goes back to, mathematics, statistics, and probability, which is all that we're dealing with, right? with this new technology. And no, no shade on our financial advisors, and thank you for all the help that you give us. But we do know that you have tools that you're using to predict how this is going to work out and what would be the most favorable probability out of all of this. That kind of thought has to go into what we do today within the media industry and within the content creation industry. Those are the things that we have to be focused on, and that's why I believe that predictive AI is really it is far more valuable to us because it is the one that can actually streamline operational processes. That's what can actually help you figure out how you can optimize the output of the real valuable resources of any business,
Right.
which is the people. That is the most important thing. And if individuals don't understand, especially individuals who are running companies, if you don't understand that your most valuable resource and your most valuable asset are the people that are actually doing the work, you won't be in business very long. Right. So how do you help and support them? And I believe that predictive AI is how you actually do that in a manner that people can engage with and understand because they can see the immediate outcome of how it makes their job easier. And then you add that into the production pipeline and the supply chain and localization and distribution, as well as development.
Right.
You've now actually brought through a thread that can actually help to pull all of those things together. And like I said, when you have all those silos, you have all kinds of issues. But when you put in something like predictive AI to help them kind of push all of these things in the right direction where it should go, and machine learning is a big part of that, you solve for a lot of those problems. And you can do it with less disruption to the individuals who are very, very happy with the way that they do their jobs today. Because in the midst of all of this, the biggest thing that we have to be concerned about is the old adage of change management. Right. Change management and change intelligence are needed for folks to actually be successful in implementing any of these things within their organizations. If you don't have buy-in, you're not going to be successful. If people don't understand, you're not going to get buy-in. If people are in fear, they will not seek to understand. So when people call us Those are the ways that we actually approach how we come into an engagement.
Renard, this is great because in prepping for this interview and this discussion with you, I went out to our common friends and I said, what should I ask Renard? And one of the overwhelming sort of sense I got from that group was ask him about AI because he's doing a lot of good work and great work from a host of committees that he's involved in Hollywood and elsewhere, uh, just in terms of where AI can be used for good work and productivity and speed,
Hmm.
efficiency, and so on. So this is, I mean, it's a great segue to the AI chapter
Yeah.
for our discussion. One place I wanted to double click on
Hmm.
is that the sense I was getting as you were talking about predictive AI was that maybe there are three areas that I got a sense of, and you tell me if
Hmm.
there were more, right? Um, Workflows, uh, decision engines,
Hmm.
and then maybe optimizers.
Hmm.
So predictive AI, when I heard you talk about different aspects where predictive AI could be used and implemented, those three look like workflows. Yes, there are lots of places where things get
Yeah.
stuck,
Oh yeah.
especially at the handoff points. People
Hmm.
get into problems there. Decision engines, of course, and then just optimization of needless steps,
Hmm.
useless steps, or
Hmm.
places where time can be shaved off. Does that kind of was that what you meant with predictive AI, or there are more?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you hit on three of the majors.
Okay.
Optimization is the key at all times. That's a given, but it's how you actually do it that's important. Sometimes we can optimize ourselves into a corner and not really get the benefit of what we're trying to do. What you can do with predictive AI is that you can actually kind of figure out before you paint yourself into that corner, you can figure out how that's going to end. And I think modeling out predictive AI so that you can see sort of, okay, how does this affect the entire chain is incredibly important. It's sort of like it's an accelerator for user acceptance testing now. You can look at it in that way, that you're going to actually be able to model out and model out where this is going to go. And I think NVIDIA is doing some really cool stuff
Huh.
with Omniverse in that particular space, where they are doing simulations of, I mean, almost anything across almost every industry that you could think of. But Omniverse is actually allowing you to be able to sort of play in a space that's going to give you real time feedback, and down to the physics of say how your manufacturing robot is going to move around your factory. It can give you all of that data back, and then you can work with either work with a company like ours or other companies, or even with NVIDIA themselves, to say, okay, what do I do with all this data that I now have out of Omniverse? How does this actually help me? That's where you now have like total vision, where we did not have that a few years ago. It's those kinds of products that are really exciting, because that gives you a safe place to try these things out, to see what the multiple outcomes could be. And I'm a Star Trek fan, way back to being
Of
a
course,
kid.
sir.
Yeah, so when you look at Star Trek, and they would do a
Right.
simulator that would actually give you the multiple outcomes,
Yes.
that could take place, if they made this decision. That's where we are right now, and that's where predictive AI really comes in handy. Um, so yeah, I get excited about that. That's the stuff that I love. When you talk about the handshake that we mentioned earlier, that's another place that we know is in need of repair, but because of sort of the human aspect of being a little bit averse to change, especially when you've been doing something for years and years and years, that tends to be a bit more difficult
Hmm.
to actually put into place. But it is simple to design and to figure out how you can essentially take an optimizer, put that into the space, and then change the way something works for the better. But you have all the organizational psychology that goes around actually how do you bring people into this and where they need to go with it. That has nothing to do with AI. It all has to do with human nature. However, AI can help in that space as well, because some studies have actually shown that individuals are more comfortable speaking to an AI chatbot than they are speaking to other human beings.
Hmm.
Well, if that research is true, um, then how do we take that knowledge
Hmm.
and make the communications aspect, which is the real breakdown between all of the silos?
That's right.
How do we take that knowledge and actually say, okay, let's build something for that. Let's make that work. So yeah, lots of fun
Yeah.
areas. But yeah, you're exactly right. Those three areas that you mentioned are three of the ones that we can definitely kind of dial in on.
Right.
And then you can also take a step and say, from the aspect of creativity, how do we, and I always tell people I'm a creative first and a curious engineer second,
Hmm.
but how do I, as a curious engineer, take this type of technology and make the life of a creative easier? So I then think about, once again, about development, whether it is a group of folks in a writer's room or something like that, or if it is a bunch of development executives who are trying to figure out where do we think this particular product is going to land, and do we feel like this is a good bet? Well, if you give me enough data, I can use predictive AI
Right.
to tell you in the past,
Almost simulation.
this is how this has been reviewed and received. And then you come back and you add in what my company is doing on the content engagement side and the kind of data that we are actually developing and pulling in.
Hmm.
And we add that to that historical data. I can now give you a pretty good prediction as to where what you're developing will land and how successful it would probably be. You
Fascinating.
know, now the research that we still have to do more research as to how accurate we can be with that. But that happens over time,
That's
you
true.
know. And if there are any companies who want to invest in us, please do. Please invest in us, and we will continue this research, and we'll see how close we can get. But yes, shameless plug. I have no shame.
No, no, this is look, Renard. I was feeling your energy as you were speaking about your new venture, as you were speaking
Yeah.
about predictive AI, as you were speaking about just the need for standards in the
Hmm.
supply chain. I felt your energy, and I'm sure that our audience is also feeling, inspired and energized with a lot of the words that they're hearing from you.
Awesome.
This has been a fascinating interaction. I have two other sort of aspects to introduce you in our next interview when we
Sure.
soon. A Star Trek enthusiast and fan, and then, and then AI, AI expert in the supply chain.
Yeah.
I would perhaps add that to
Oh,
the
dude,
LinkedIn.
dude, we can talk about Star Trek for hours and hours and hours. I believe that it has definitely been a huge part of my life. I most people know that I started university as a marine biology major. I've always been into science, but then I found out that what really I enjoy is the storytelling aspect of science. How we can tell stories with science is that's really really cool to me, and it does go back to Star Trek. Watching that and watching, the chief science officer. Everybody loves Spock.
Yep.
Spock was the guy, and that's
Yes.
who I gravitated to. That's who I was
Fascinating.
like connected to. And it's fun to think about that because some of the things that you look at on Star Trek, they're now commonplace to us in our world today. You know,
Right.
we're getting to the place now where we can have a universal translator. We are at that point now where you can use your phone to be a universal translator.
Fascinating.
And that's like a tool that wow, as a kid, you thought that was science fiction, and now look where it is. So I do believe that there are a lot of these things that drive, innovation in what we invent over time.
That is so true. Gosh, that thought is going to stay with me for some time now. I might actually start watching Star Trek all over again for
Yes,
the
yes. Do
energy.
and look, I do it. I do it yearly. So I watch the original series at least once a year, and I watch them all the way through.
Fascinating.
But I also watch various, the all of the other little offshoots and stuff like that. I'm totally fascinated by it, and I love Star Trek. I love Star Wars too. So I'm not one of those fans that's on one side or the other. I love both series, but for me, this is a wonderful time to play. To be really honest, it's a wonderful time to play with all of the tools that are in front of us, and it's a wonderful time to explore
Hmm,
really where you can go. You talked about the sort of addition of game engines into the production process.
that's right.
That's opened up the door for so many advancements. And what we're seeing with certain tools, and I'll just say with both Unity and Epic being sort of the bigger ones that are out there, we're just seeing advancement over advancement over advancement. They're constantly changing the way that we look at this from an animation standpoint, using Epic's game engine
Hmm,
has opened the door for individuals who typically would not have been interested in this side of our business.
wow.
But now they understand that, hey, wait, I'm building a character for a gaming platform, but I can actually take aspects of what I have built and move that into the production pipeline, which will then help them to streamline what they're doing. Also, within using game engines, we can actually help actresses and actors create a better performance because we can now show them in real time
Yeah,
what the animated character is going to look like as they are performing the voiceover
fascinating.
for the action in which the character is going to take by using mocap and using real-time gaming engines to then project back out what the character would actually do. That then helps them with their performance, which then also helps the animators
Right.
because they now can say, okay, as I get to the point of rigging out this animated character, I now see where the actor or the actress was going and what they were going for, which brought the writer's paper and the writer's words to life. Now, as a person who's rigging this, I'm going to tweak the cheek a little bit because it goes along with where the actor was actually inflecting. I'm going to actually move the hands in the gestures in which they were making as they were doing the voiceover. All of that data is being captured now,
Wow.
which opens up a whole new way that we look at animation. And that is because of the computational power that we have today, but then the very smart brains that put together a lot of these game engine tools and a lot of these animation tools that we're building today. These things are. I mean, we could go on forever to be honest to talk about this stuff at all. There's so much happening in our industry right now, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
And what you just described was also this exact confluence of creativity and technology and engineering. Uh,
Yes.
so that's a perfect blend, actually. Renard, my last question was going to be on what is I2A2 stand for? Because I should have asked you that as the first question, but
Yeah,
I
yeah. I will tell you this that I2A2 it does have a meaning. But the meaning is there are a number of things. The first one is intelligent innovation,
interesting,
which is the two I's, and then accessibility and advisory are the two A's.
fascinating.
Those are the main two,
Mhm.
but we also have for the A's automation. We have advancement. And then for the eyes, we also have inclusion
Of course.
and integration.
Aha.
So
Okay.
yeah. So
Fascinating.
I2A2 is sort of the way that we look at our company, which is to be inclusive in the way that we innovate and to help people integrate, and for us to be a team that advances technology. And then we also look at how we can advise people on how they use technology. And accessibility is really important to us because in the education space as well as the media entertainment space, we want to make sure that any tool that we build is accessible to everyone.
Hmm.
So we are not just looking at individuals who are neurotypical. What about the entire world of people who are neurodiverse? How can we make sure that we're creating a space for them
Hmm.
as well? And as we know, every individual is an individual. So what we want to do is figure out what are the common areas for everyone and where can we bring all that together. So that is what I2A2 stands for.
Fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah.
Again, Renard, can't thank you enough for a really, really exciting conversation. Like I mentioned earlier, I felt the energy as we were talking about, a host of these aspects really close to your heart.
Yeah.
On behalf of Vitrina and our entire community of professionals, I wanted to thank you for your time and your expert comments. It's been a
Thank you
pleasure.
so much. Thank you. Thank you, Atul. And it's been a pleasure. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Fantastic. Awesome.